Subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon to never miss an update.
That was a difficult decision, to be honest, to leave JP Morgan for a no known brand, especially when it comes to family and friends who don't recognize the value of taking a risk. I got a lot of
Right.
pushback from my parents.
Hi guys, welcome to another episode of Conversations in Quarantine. We are talking to someone who's the absolute upper class of professions as far as MBAs are concerned. She's a consultant, and not just any consultant. She's a consultant at McKinsey, and also not just in any city. She's working in London. Before this, she's worked in New York. Riya Chhabra, welcome to Conversations in Quarantine.
Thank you, Kunj. That I'm giggling as you say that. And that introduction makes me definitely embarrassed because I don't feel like the upper class. But thank you for having me, and I'm very excited to be part of this conversation.
In India they say that जिसको कुछ नहीं करने मिलता है वो BA degree करता है, and that's why you started. You did your BA degree in Delhi University, and you've come a long way since. After that you went to IIMC, the Indian Institute of Mass Communication, on a campus that is full of people who don't necessarily always chase money. So what was that like, and what made you go into IIMC?
There's a little bit of a story there. When I graduated from undergrad or from bachelor's, I realized I don't want to be a journalist. I want to do advertising. And I started to have this business kida, as they say, right? I said, I want to be an entrepreneur. And so after third year, I actually started up with a friend at home. And we were starting this marketing consulting for nonprofits and startups. And the idea was actually small companies that don't have their own marketing teams or don't have ad agencies on roles will actually benefit, and we'll give them consulting services on a project basis. So we thought the idea was phenomenal. We were 20 years old, and that went kaput, right? 6 months in, we were still bleeding money. At some point, my mom was like, okay, you need to get a job, get out of the house, and this is not working. And so then I started to actually think of looking for a job, which turned out to be really hard because all my education was in a field that I didn't want to be in anymore. So then
Right.
the question became, okay, I need to get the right skills that will put me in the space of business marketing. Marketing seemed closest because I was in advertising, filmmaking, so it felt like an adjacent place to be. And then actually after undergrad, I applied to MICA, which I know you're from, Kunj, so it's close to home, and I got rejected, right? Because I had I came from a very weird background, this arts
Right.
person. So then I applied to
Right.
IIMC because it was like my second choice. But the intention always was to get closer to business, because from that 1 6 month stint of a startup that failed, I realized that that is a big gap, that I just don't have those skills.
So from IIMC you get into some adjacency which I am not able to understand, which got you to JP Morgan,
Yeah.
doing asset management there. What was that like? Like, how did you get
Yeah.
placed in a non-marketing role out of IIMC?
At IIMC, most campus placements were agencies, either PR agencies or ad agencies or media planning agencies. And I had this hypothesis that I don't want to do that for various reasons, but being closer to business, etc. Now that was tough. So I started to talk to my professors and say, I want a marketing job. And so one of the professors, God bless him, he was amazing, right? I will always be grateful to the professors who look out for you. He sent me an Excel sheet with 300 email addresses and names of marketing managers across the country. And he was running a startup on the side, and he had this database of his potential clients. And he said, here's a list, write to them, see what happens. And I kid you not, I literally wrote to every one of those 300 people, customized emails, right? And that was, I remember that was
Right.
Bacardi, Unilever, Bharti, AXA, the complete range of categories. And it didn't matter to me what category it was. I just wanted a first job. I wanted a step into the business world with a marketing job. Now,
Right.
here's what happened. JP Morgan was not on that list of 300. Bharti AXA Life Insurance was. And this was the headquarters, was in Bombay. So I sent them an email. And now here's the part which I came to know much later. The CMO of Bharti AXA, who got my random email, went for a smoke with his buddy, who was the CMO of JP Morgan. The JP Morgan CMO, he had just lost someone from his team and he had a headcount. He tells the other CMO that, I'm looking for someone on my team. And this person says, I got this random email from someone in Delhi. I got a CV. I'll send it to you, see where it goes. And so that's how that guy, the CMO, he called me And then I went for an interview to Bombay, and that's how I got my first job. What I learned from that anyway was that you have to increase the probability of randomness, because I could have, applied to 10 companies, and then just the conversion ratio would have been low, and therefore success would have been lower. So anyway, that's how the switch happened. Someone took a chance.
The times that we are going through, I think a lot of people are going to have to do these kinds of outreach, proactive, reaching out to people to find that ideal job. And this is an important theorem that they can practice, which is that you should increase the probability of your randomness. This was your first serious job at JP Morgan, more or less. What were some of the things that you picked up over there which made you fall in love with this idea of working in a big corporate, working in a big organization which is like reputed all over the world, because that's where you built your career afterwards? So this was your first exposure. What was that like?
I definitely learned a ton. And I think the learning curve was so steep across so many dimensions. And I think that's probably true for people with their first jobs. Things like just, how to write a business email, how to engage with different stakeholders across functions. I was the youngest person in my entire organization because it was also a pretty lean team. So asset management, just for context, was new to India, right? JP Morgan mutual funds, people had not heard of that. People would go to Fidelity or HDFC. And so this was the first retail brand that JP Morgan had set up. So it pretty much worked like a small organization within the context of a large organization. But what I learned was how to engage with different people across different functions, as well as different levels of tenure, right? To be able to gain credibility in a room full of portfolio managers who come from a very different background, have a very different KPI for their job, them to engage with someone who's in marketing, which was me, who would help them write a press release, to be able to establish my value proposition to someone who did not see necessarily value in what I did was, I think, the hardest part of my job, and also the most gratifying. The other thing I learned was a bit more about business and finance, right? So obviously, given my background, to me, just to learn about the stock market, to be part of the sales calls every Monday, where we were evaluating where the equity market had gone, where the debt market had gone. That were just the words, and I was the jargon of the industry that I was surrounding myself with. That really helped, because now I could speak the language. And that's already another step closer to what my idea was of business, right? And that's where this idea of also the CEO's role became clear. So at some point, there were some changes in the team, and I started to report to the CEO of the asset management business. And that was a phenomenal experience, right? When you see up close and personal how the senior decision maker runs his day and goes about making these high stakes decisions, that was pretty cool.
Right. Okay. So then why the move to an NGO like Milaap after JP Morgan? Because again, this is like a wave goes like this again. So what happened where this hankering for another MBA grew in you, and this time abroad?
Here's the part that most people don't know. By the time I was in JP Morgan, my second year, I started to think maybe it's time for an MBA. Because you usually think, right, 2 years in, you've got 2-3 years of work X, now let's do an MBA. And at that point, I applied to Wharton and ISB, right, with my 670 GMAT. And I thought, I have JP Morgan on my CV. I've done some good work X. And I got turned down from both schools. And I really wanted to talk about this today, because again, I feel so strongly about the fact that people don't talk about the misses, right? You only see INSEAD on my CV. Now I'm reaching the end of what feels to me like a comfortable work X point based on a CV, and now I don't know what to do. And I'm also starting to feel less inspired, right? Like a lot of rejections, you start to feel a little less like jaded a bit. And then I came across this startup, Milaap, and I read about them in the Entrepreneur magazine, about 2 young graduates from Singapore who had actually started this crowdfunding business in Singapore and Bangalore. And so I wrote to them to say, how can I help? Can I be part of your world in any way? Can I volunteer? And I wrote to them with the intention of volunteering, right? And if I think back, a lot of the thread here is just doing something about an idea and just following my kira. And I keep saying kira because that's what my friends always joke about. There's always a kira, and I will just follow it, right? So I followed that. I wrote to them, and multiple conversations, and they were also scaling up, and that somehow turned into a job offer many months down the line. And then that was a difficult decision, to be honest, to leave JP Morgan for a no known brand. It was a bit of a risk. So I moved to Bangalore from Bombay. So it was a pretty big commitment. And especially when it comes to family and friends who don't recognize the value of, taking a risk. I got a lot of pushback from my parents. who said, why would you
Right.
leave a well-paying job and you're doing so well in JP Morgan, you can stay here. And even people at JP Morgan, my CEO, actually, he really pushed back to say, you have a great potential career here. But then actually, I remember having this conversation with one of the senior portfolio managers at JP Morgan. He'd come down from Hong Kong and he was one of the legends. So I had a chat with him and he'd come down for some press conference and I spoke with him. And I told him I'm considering leaving for this startup and everyone thinks it's a bad idea. He said, don't listen to these grown-ups. You should take a job you actually don't feel committed to and love. Do what you really feel like doing, and something to that effect. I don't remember the words. Something very inspiring in the moment. So anyway,
Right.
that was the final straw, and I did take that plunge, much against many people's wishes. And I genuinely think that turned out to be the most defining decision of my career, because what I learned in the 2 years at Milaap was a huge tectonic shift away from what I could have learned somewhere else. And then it also set me up for the business school, because that hadn't left my mind, right? Milaap was always in my mind intended to be a bridge. It was something I would do for a couple of years, and then move on to business school.
Why do you say that it would be a good story for your, your attempt at a business school again? Joining Milaap from JP Morgan, how did it add to your story when you went to your business school?
So I think a place like INSEAD, and I definitely put a lot of weight on, passion and having a long-term vision for your life and a sense of purpose for what you want to do. And I think personally, if I hadn't made that switch to Milaap, my worldview would have been quite limited to a large corporate. I would have found it hard to articulate my passion in the essay, in the interview, just build a convincing story about what do I really care about and why. So some part of it was really accessing a depth of myself to know what do I really want. And then the other part of it is, how does it look from a CV perspective? And I think having that diversity of experience to have worked at a large company and then a startup definitely made my profile, I'm guessing, right, made it look a lot more interesting and diverse. And diversity is important, again, to a place like INSEAD in different shapes and forms. So I think in both ways it helped, CV-wise, as well as helping me articulate my story better.
Riya, as you know, we've been talking to you about this mentorship program that we are running called Counsel, and you kindly agreed to be a part of the program as a mentor. So how are you approaching this mentorship?
I actually think my life could have been easier if I had spoken to someone who had been there, done that, and had been able to help me just open up my mind. So I've taken a very self-centered view on this because I think I would have benefited from it. And so I'm hoping that having access to someone just to share my story and to be able to talk to you about how I would do this, hopefully that will help.